Deep breaths, Eddie, because you're about to talk about something that is the bane of your professional existence, man. It doesn't do much for your followership game. It didn't exactly make you a fan of where you worked all the time. That something is micromanagement. I feel like there should be an echo effect behind that. But that's okay. Sharna Fabiano is here to put it all into perspective on this episode of I Want to Work There. Deep breaths. No matter the institution, company, or organization, everyone wants to find the best talent, and everyone wants to keep their best talent. Higher education is no different. I'm Eddie Francis. I've worked in both talent acquisition and higher ed marketing. On this podcast, we're going to explore the ways to create a great experience for faculty and staff on your campus. Because in education, a great employee experience equals a great student experience. And who doesn't want that? We'll have some honest conversation, get insights from experts, and hear success stories from campuses. It's all about developing an attractive employer brand, something that'll make the people say, I want to work there. Sharna Fabiano is a certified life coach who specializes in leadership, followership, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, communication, and collaboration. She's the author of Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork, and the host of the Lead and Follow podcast. She's also a fellow member, I should say, of the International Leadership Association, where she is the Followership Membership Community Chair. And that comes in, that's definitely going to come in a few minutes. And bonus, she is an internationally recognized tango artist. So, Sharna, thank you so much for joining me on I Want to Work There. How are you?
Thank you, Eddie. I'm well, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let me just be blunt here for the listener. Micromanagement is nothing new to anybody. Being micromanaged, when it came to my situation, it has done nothing for how I've perceived the value of where I worked. And so it led me to ask if this is a thing. Is this just an Eddie thing? Is Eddie just being a little too sensitive when it comes to being micromanaged? So I reached out to the International Leadership Association followership message board to see if there was someone who could put the effects of micromanagement into perspective. Sharna raised her hand, and I thank you so much for that. So, Sharna, micromanagement, as you just heard from what I just said, can often be seen as a negative, especially by those who are in a followership position. But let's set the table first when it comes to followership itself. What is followership?
Well, thank you for the question. And I know that term is still newish for a lot of us. For me, the concepts of followership and leadership have the most meaning when we talk about them together. So I'm going to just start by offering one of my favorite definitions of the two roles together. And it comes from also fellow ILA members, Mark and Samantha Hurwitz, the co authors of Leadership is Half the Story. And their definition goes something like this: leadership is setting the frame, and followership is creating within the frame. If you have any listeners who are dancers out there, that might sound familiar. But another way of saying that is just to say that followership is what you're doing in a group when you're not leading. So if you remember the last time you're in a group, even if your group is like two people, there's a leader doing something and then everyone else is doing the following, whatever that might be at the time: listening, asking a question, voicing concerns. It can be a lot of things. It's as complex and varied as leadership itself.
One of the things that it sounds like when it comes to followership is that there is kind of an active role in making sure that things move forward. You're not just taking orders or following directions, you are actually trying to participate somehow. Is that an accurate way of putting it?
Well, I think that's an accurate way of saying good followership, right? So
Okay.
if you think, there's ways to be a great leader or like not so great leader. There's also ways to be a great follower and a not so great follower. So obviously, as coaches and trainers, we want to encourage people to be great at leading and at following.
Yeah, that's yeah, because well, duh, because now you got Kelly's model. So you got the disengaged, the high involvement, the low involvement. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, so there you go. So anybody who is in that position where they report to someone, they can either be really engaged and following or not so engaged. But either way, what they're doing is affecting because it's interesting because what they're doing is affecting in some way what the leader is doing in some way, right?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you pointing that out because a lot of the stumbling block, I think, around what is followership is just recognizing that if you're not the leader, you still have influence, right? And sometimes you have a lot of influence, and claiming that agency and degree of influence from the followership position can be really profound, for people in a variety of levels.
So why is it when it comes to micromanagement, and Sharna, I apologize if you wind up being my therapist during this interview, but why is it that micromanage is seen by people who are in a followership position as a negative, as such a negative?
Well, when I talk to people, and I can, speak for myself as well, it's a universally felt experience. When people use the word micromanaging, they might not always be referring to the exact same leader behavior, but they're definitely referring to the same gut feeling ick. And it's generally described as, I'm sure, you've described it, as being controlled, of being kind of having your freedom taken away, of being disrespected in some way. So nobody wants that. Humans hate being controlled. I don't think anyone wants to feel that. And I don't also think anyone wants other people to feel that. So when that word is invoked to micromanage, it kind of means like there's been a boundary crossed or there's too much of something from the leader, and the follower person feels that they've had their agency taken away.
Yeah, and speaking personally, I swear I'm not going to make this about me, but speaking personally, one of the things that did affect the way I participated in what was going on, one of the things that affected my followership is that I didn't feel trusted because the first thing that came to mind was, okay, you keep telling me to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and you keep telling me as if I don't know what to do. Do you not trust me? And then in one situation, my attitude became, well, you know what? If you don't trust me, I definitely don't trust you. So it seemed toxic to me. And I just kept wondering, was this me? Am I being too sensitive? That's something that kind of occurred in my situations. I can say that I didn't feel trusted. But at one point, it got to a point where I didn't trust the leader, the person I was reporting to. Is that something that you've heard others say? Have they alluded to that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be like a surefire way to erode any relationship that you have built, with your person. One of the tricky things there is that it's not the same, not necessarily, like I said before, the same behavior. So, say we have the same manager, right? You and me, Eddie, and they're sending you these sort of daily instructions, very detailed on how to do something. If you know how to do that thing already, you're really good at it, you have your own style, your own system for getting it done really efficiently, that behavior might feel really awful to you because you're like, don't tell me how to do my job. I'm good at this. Let me do it. Let me help you. Let me help the team. But if I have never done that task, and the manager is saying, here you go, Sharna, here's your daily instructions, just do these things, I might feel like, wow, that's really helpful. Now I know exactly what to do. So, I will put a caveat here that there's definitely some general behaviors that are consistently reported as micromanaging, but there's some variation there. And so I think when we talk about micromanaging and followers saying, hey, I'm being micromanaged, it's more about a feeling that something has been done that's too much or that's wrong for that person.
Okay. Okay. And it's interesting because that makes sense to me because as someone who has led a team before or a couple of teams, I have definitely been in a position where I have thought to myself, okay, person A on the team, they can just go. I mean, if I just say, hey, here's what I need to happen, I can just give them a very general term or a general direction and say, by the end of the week, I just want to make sure we get such and such done. And they'll probably come to me and say, oh, I did such and such and such. And I'm going, oh, that's more than a bargain for. Thanks a lot. But then person B, I'm sitting there going, okay, I think I need to give them a little bit more help to get them from point A to point B. And so it does seem to me that in one case I did have someone who said, "Hey, listen, just let me get it done and I'll get it done." But in another case, I have had a team member come to me and say, "Well, tell me exactly how you want this to go." And I felt a little bad at first because I'm like, "Man, I don't want to give you every single step." But then that's what they were asking for. They were really asking me to give them specific directions, and so I had to kind of figure out how to do that without feeling as if I was micromanaging. That was an odd position for me.
Very well stated. And I think this is one of the reasons that from the followership perspective, it's almost always clear when micromanaging is happening, right? Because you feel it. You're the recipient of that. You're like, whoa, this feels terrible. You don't trust me. I feel controlled. Stop it. Like that's really clear. But when you're the leader, trying to coordinate multiple people, just as you described, you just sometimes don't know, right? I don't really think there are many managers out there who like, yeah, my style is micromanaging. Like, I'm going to micromanage this person. Like I don't think leaders like set out to do this. I think they just sometimes don't realize it because they are looking from the opposite perspective, right? They're looking from the leadership perspective and they maybe haven't turned the microscope around, so to speak, right, to look from the follower side. So that's a little bit, one of the factors I think that contributes to this like misunderstanding on the part of leadership, right? They're like, I don't think I'm micromanaging. I'm interpreting my behavior differently than the employee is. And that's sort of like a gap in perspective.
So that brings me to an interesting question. I mean, what so that seems like that's one misunderstanding that a leader may have, that they don't interpret it that way because they're just doing what they're doing. What else do leaders often misunderstand about micromanagement?
Well, I think when you do start looking from the other side, you see a lot of things that you didn't see before, like micromanaging being just one of them. But it probably, because of that perspective gap, don't fully grasp the impact, right, of what they're doing. Because from their perspective, they're trying to help, say, and maybe their employees like, get away from my desk, stop watching my every move, right? Like
Yeah.
I once had actually a boss like look over my shoulder, like at the computer, and it was horrible. But he thought he was helping, I think. So I think they don't fully grasp because of that misunderstanding of what their own interpretation of their behavior, don't fully grasp the impact, right? How much that behavior contributes to alienation, like checking out, leaving, actually, things like that.
So this sounds like it could be on the part of it sounds like to me that on the part of a leader who may micromanage, or may or may not realize that they're doing it, they may not be catching some nonverbal cues from from the people who they're working with. It could be, and it sounds like it might even be a gap in emotional intelligence. I mean, I can recall one situation where I started to micromanage someone. I didn't think I was, but this person gave me a very clear nonverbal cue that they didn't appreciate what I was doing. And so I stopped. I immediately stopped because I saw her body language and I was like, okay, I need to stop this because I'm really annoying this person. And as it turns out, she wound up doing some fantastic work without me pulling her into the office saying, "Hey, let's do this." I mean, she just went for it. So it seems like, it seems like for a leader who may not understand what's happening, they may not be catching the emotional intelligence may not be kicking in. Is that a fair observation or a fair thought, maybe?
Absolutely. I think if you are a very perceptive leader, very emotionally intelligent leader, you're definitely more likely to catch those. And I would also add that sometimes, because of the inherent power imbalance in many organizations, employees in follower roles will sometimes mask their experience, right? Out of fear of retribution or punishment. So there's a reason, even a very observant leader might not know, right? So if you're my boss, Eddie, and I think if I upset you, I'll get fired. Even if I feel like I'm being micromanaged, I might not tell you or indicate it in any other way, right? I might pretend or, express even facially that I'm fine, because I don't want to get into trouble. And then I'll just leave. I'll just leave my job, right? I'll just be like, I'm leaving. So you won't never even know. So I guess my point is, if you as a leader can set up a scenario where you have open dialogue with your employees, that's like the best situation possible, because it should be okay to talk about these things. You can't really talk about a problem if it's not okay to talk about the problem to begin with. So, if I were like to, give one piece of advice to managers, is like, as soon as you can, set up a relationship of open dialogue. Tell your team members, like, hey, we're doing this together. Leadership and followership are both required. I want to make sure, I'm doing everything I can to make your job fulfilling and stress free to the extent that I can. And then they'll tell you, but because that power imbalance is there, like, it's really often on the onus of the manager to kind of set up a healthy relationship to begin with.
Let's play a game. What keywords does your website rank for? What doesn't it rank for that you think it should? What are a few opportunities you could be winning on if you tweaked some website copy? Okay, how'd you do? Not great? That's okay. Because our friends at DD Agency want to answer all of those questions for you and then some. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and much more. If this sounds like something you could benefit from, give those folks a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. Head on over to enrollify.org/DDASEO or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you a 10% discount off of your audit. Again, head on over to enrollify.org/DDASEO to learn more. Now, on to the show.
I want to go a little deeper into what happens on the employee engagement side of this, because you have these different ways that people see. The dog understands exactly what's happening. So when it comes down to employee engagement, what are the different types of behaviors that people may observe when it comes down to being micromanaged? I mean, I know for me, I was the one who I was shut down basically. I felt there was nothing further to talk about because I'm sitting there like, okay, you're not listening, you're micromanaging, you think I can't do my job. I don't understand why I need to waste my breath on you. So I'm not going to talk about it and I'm going to go exercise my options. And so, but what are some of the other things that maybe you have seen, or maybe folks have spoken to you about? What other types of behaviors have you noticed?
Well, I think what you're describing is unfortunately one of the most common, right? Just, the checkout, right? Like, okay, once I've had that experience of feeling disrespected or losing my agency, or, someone, a manager behaving in a way that makes me feel that they don't want don't want me to contribute, then, you get your engagement basically goes to zero, right? You check out, you get all the bad things that low engagement indicates, like low productivity, lower quality, lower trust, lack of communication. So all of those unpleasant symptoms, right, appear, and then you get people leaving. So I don't think it's that mysterious, in a sense. I think the mysterious part is really just managers and leaders sometimes not realizing what they're doing, because they're only looking at it from one direction. And, this other kind of phenomenon I mentioned, which is that in a hierarchy, you have to kind of work a little harder to create open dialogue to begin with.
That's kind of the unfortunate thing about higher education. I mean, it's such a such a system of hierarchy, and especially when you have the people who are saying, well, my credentials have more weight than your credentials. And so, and in some situations what people are told is, don't speak if you don't have the same credentials as I do, or don't, and so I can only imagine one of the things that I have also seen when folks have felt micromanaged and they have felt not trusted is I've seen folks sabotage too. I mean, they've tried to sabotage the leader as much as they possibly could, which is nasty, but I have seen it. And And to me, that really speaks of a very, very high level of frustration where people just can't they just can't hold it anymore. And that has got to be for the leader, especially for the leader who may not realize that they are micromanaging, that has really got to be pretty confusing for them, pretty odd for them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I guess that makes me think it's worth saying that not everyone has the option to leave their job, right? If they're unhappy. And so if you're one of those people who can't leave for whatever reason, then yes, it will come out in other ways in these acts of resentment or sabotage.
So I like to look at the way forward for folks, especially if there is someone who is an HR leader listening to this from a college or university, if especially hopefully if there is a president or a chancellor listening to this. One of the things I'm really curious about is so a leader has seen some of the difficulties in micromanagement, whether they know they're micromanaging or not. They may not know. And it looks like they want to turn that into something that's going to turn their employees more into cheerleaders. In your mind, how can leaders do that? How can they turn that micromanagement, that environment around into one where they start to earn a little bit more engagement, a little bit more trust, and then eventually they can turn their employees into cheerleaders? What can they do?
Well, I think the first thing to do, it might sound a little bit funny, but to understand that you can't make an employee do anything, right? And that humbling stance is going to determine how you approach them, right? So if I, as a manager, say, all right, I see I've been maybe micromanaging a little bit, I'm going to just turn my employees into cheerleaders. Like that's a very kind of hierarchical, like controlling type of attitude, right? And I know it might sound like a nuance, like we're splitting hairs, but it really is important to take on the mindset of I want to work with people rather than I'm going to make them do something or turn them into something, right? Just to imagine yourself as a follower receiving that sort of attitude. And again, looking at it from the other side is very illuminating. So first is really, as the leader, adopting a mindset where you genuinely want to pursue a reciprocal, mutually respectful relationship with people. And that doesn't mean you can't operate in a hierarchy. I think it's also worth saying that hierarchies are functional or can be functional, right? We have them for a reason, and credentials do matter, right? They denote certain amounts of expertise, and they're useful. But there's never a hierarchy of human value in an organization, right? No matter what, right? We are all human beings at the end of the day. We are all equally valuable as human beings, whether we're in an organization, on a dance floor, at a campsite, like no matter where we are, if we're in a group, we're all equal in terms of human value. So remembering that at the same time as we're operating within hierarchies can be really helpful. So then I would suggest reading a book like Mark and Samantha Hurwitz, Leadership is Half the Story, or my book, Lead and Follow, just to give you that understanding of both perspectives, leadership and followership. It's really been kind of revelatory for many people I've worked with, no matter what their position, right? Just kind of being able to appreciate the two sides of this working relationship, right? Because in any group, you have leading and you have following. You can't have one without the other. And sometimes they even switch. So that foundational perspective is really useful. And then, you can share it with your team. You can have very candid conversations with them individually or in groups saying, hey, I've been thinking a lot about collaboration. I want to reset here. I know we've maybe had some misunderstandings. I want to do better. I know it's a little taboo, but I always encourage leaders to solicit feedback from their team members, and that might take a while, right? If you have some people who are alienated or checked out or who aren't trusting you, they're not going to just tell you immediately. And this comes back to this: you can't force anyone to do anything, right? You can just ask them. I mean, as a dancer, I love the terminology of inviting, which is what we say the leader does on the dance floor. You're inviting someone to dance. And so when you are in a team and you're the leader of the team, you are inviting them to work with you. You're not trying to like force them into it, right? You're inviting them. So what makes it inviting to work with you? You know, ask yourself that question. Those are, I don't know, I will just pause there and see if that brings anything up for you, Eddie.
Oh, snap. Okay, so wait, it all makes sense now. It all makes sense. No, I'm sorry. This is gonna sound really, really nutty, but but in terms of, you know what? So in terms of dance, okay, I went to an all boys high school, and I always noticed that with the guys who would go to the girls and try to pull them onto the floor, it was just the worst. It was just the worst thing. But the guys who learned to hold their hands out and wait for the young lady to accept the invitation, it seemed to go a lot better. They seem to have a lot more fun with one another. So if you're a leader, you cannot pull your employee onto the dance floor. It's not going to work.
Not going to work very well. No, nobody's going to have fun with that. Right.
But here's the other thing. Okay, let's get into your arena right now, really quickly with the dance thing, because all these dance analogies are starting to pop into my head now. I mean, because it does seem that if a leader really wanted to get their employee engaged, especially if it's the leader who would take their partner onto a dance floor, and I imagine trying to whisper instructions to the partner during the dance. I imagine that's a little bit like micromanaging because what is that what dance is about? I mean, what is it exactly? How can we put this in terms, especially for leaders who really like to dance, who might not? I'm dead serious about this. I mean, how can we put this in terms of a dance so that a leader would understand, or so as someone in a followership position can accept the leader's invitation, maybe even.
Yeah, well, now you're speaking my language, obviously. But yeah, but I can tell you that micromanaging or its equivalent definitely happens on the dance floor, and we don't consider that skillful leading, right? We consider it like over leading or like over controlling. So I can describe for you briefly what a great partnership looks like on the dance floor, what we're striving for. And, when we're beginners, we don't always get there, but the idea of harmonious, reciprocal leading and following, the leader's job is to basically choreograph. And for those of you who are not dancers listening, imagine the relationship between a choreographer or a director, right, of a stage performance and the performers on the stage. So this is one of my favorite metaphors for those who, haven't had social dance experience yet. It's never too late. So your director choreographer is the leader. They're usually, sitting in the audience, looking up at the stage, giving directions, asking for things. And the performers are up on the stage, the actors, the dancers, they are embodying, right, the vision of the director. They are doing the movement. They are doing the performance. So this on a very small level is a good representation of the division of labor between the leader and the follower on the dance floor, who are the dancing couple. So you have leader saying like back, left, right, pause. So giving these directions about how to navigate the dance floor. And you have the follower partner executing those movements, with their own personally developed technique, their own choices about style and quality of movement. So I'll just pause there. That's kind of roughly how dancers consider the reciprocal division of labor. Hopefully that makes some sense.
It makes a whole lot of sense to me. It definitely makes a lot of sense. But I do see, I can definitely see where it's really interesting because I mean, you're at work, and I think I might have even used the dance metaphor at some point with one of my teams where I said something like, "Hey, this is all a dance, and we all have to be coordinated." Da, 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 and I think I might have even said that at one point. So I do think that if you really think about it, and you have to excuse me, Sharna. So I'm thinking about when I see people dance in the club. So anyway, so which I know is a whole different deal, but I mean, it does you do get that vibe when everybody seems to be feeling the same beat, and everybody seems to be really cooperating with one another, and everybody is giving each other space, but at the same time everybody's sharing space. And you just see this coordination and everybody just having this good time, and there's all this harmony, and everybody walks out of the place smiling and all that other good stuff. And whereas with other times when you have the people who like to dominate the dance floor and they're flailing all over the place and somebody's going to get an elbow in the gut, which I've gotten a few times, that's kind of a rotten experience because you're looking forward to having such a good time and somebody's ruining it for you because they're just doing way too much. So I can see how this all works. You just set off a light bulb. I'm going to dance a lot more now.
Fabulous. My work here is done.
Well, Sharna, if anyone wants to learn more about what you do or get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, thank you for that. I would first encourage listeners to check out my podcast, Lead and Follow, because there are just so many wonderful interviews with people there teaching and training leadership and followership together, people speaking about their own experience of followership. It really kind of brings this topic to light. And I love every one of those interviews. And then my website, sharnafabiano.com, that's where I post everything else about my coaching and training.
So I will make this recommendation for the listener that when you pop over to Sharna's website, and all that information is available in the show notes. There is a great episode that Sharna did with someone from the healthcare professions about followership in healthcare, and a lot of folks do compare healthcare and higher education. So if you want to get some great insights about followership, then that is a great place to do it. And Sharna, thank you so much. I appreciate you for joining me on I Want to Work There.
It's a great pleasure, Eddie, anytime.
I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, check out other Enrollify shows. The Enrollify podcast network is growing by the month with all kinds of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows. And they're jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. There are some great industry voices that you can check out, like Terry Flannery, my good friend Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Corinne Myers, Dustin Ramsdell, Jamie Gleason, and many more. Learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. So come and find yours.